Hey there retro games fans, this is Andy C from Pieces of 8-Bit. Welcome to this week's video. Going to do something a little bit different this week. We're not talking about a game, not specifically anyway. We're going to be talking about Windows 95, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my memories of Windows 95, how it came to be important for me, and you know how I used it. And I know it is just a piece of software, but it was a very important piece of software, whether you're a gamer or a programmer or just a user of computers or a business or whatever it happens to be. Windows 95 was a really important turning event. Love it or hate it, especially for gaming, because this is a gaming channel. I'm going to talk a little bit about Windows 95 itself, why it was important, what made it different from things that had come before, and how it really revolutionized gaming in general. So not just PC gaming, but it also did have a big impact on console gaming as well. All of those things are coming up. Obviously, I do have my month with review coming up in a couple of weeks, so it's probably going to be quite short because I'm going to cover a lot of the stuff that I would normally cover in that review here. But I just wanted to kind of talk to you about it. I was thinking about really those memories. I've got a lot of memories of that time of Windows 95 coming out and discussion around it, and I was young and idealistic, and I had lots of views about Microsoft and you know what impact that I thought Windows 95 was going to have and whether I was impressed with it or not, and I will cover all of that. So first section, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about the phenomenon that is Windows 95, the reason why it was important and the reason why it was important specifically for gaming. And then in the next section, the second section, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about my memories of it. Where did I find it? How did I pick it up? How did I install it and get it running, and what did I think of it, and what my first impressions? Was it cool? Was it not cool? That's what I'm going to talk to you about at the end. So it's not a review of Windows 95 itself. That will come at the end of the month, as I've got back into living with it for a month. But this is really just my memories of Windows 95, and I would love to hear yours too. So please drop some comments in below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where were you? Did you go to the launch event? Do you remember it? What were your thoughts about Windows 95? Did you game on it? Was it amazing? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on that. So let's get stuck straight in with the first part, which is just a little bit about Windows 95 and its impact on gaming in, well, for the next 30 years, I guess. I'll see you there. Probably one of the cringiest videos out there, although Steve Ballmer, who was one of the senior figures in Microsoft at the time, he's the taller guy with the bald head there. He if you search for him on the web and search for Steve Ballmer developers, you'll find a video on there that is even more cringy than this one. And despite popular belief, if you type in Windows 95 launch event, this is the video that you get. In fact, it is not actually the Windows 95 launch event. The Windows 95 launch event was actually a much glitzier affair on NBC, hosted by Jay Leno. This is just the kind of level that Microsoft went to. So you can ignore that kind of geek fest back there. It is just fun to watch. It's kind of crazy and a little bit disturbing, especially as someone who comes from a software engineering background myself. I find that video a little bit cringy, but it is kind of fun to watch, but not the Windows 95 one. Microsoft apparently spent over between $200 and $300 million on their launch event. It was a big deal. There was so much hype. It was everywhere. There was advertising on the television. There were billboards. There were newspaper articles. All sorts were in there. Their training videos even were done by Jennifer Aniston and Matthew Perry. So that is just the level that Microsoft wanted to invest in this product. They spent $3 million alone just on the rights for Start Me Up from the Rolling Stones. Obviously the signature tune of Windows 95 throughout that period. So on the 24th of August 1995 at 12:01 a.m. Windows 95 was launched, and it was so popular it sold over 1 million copies just within the first 4 days. There was one shop in New York apparently that supposedly sold 1,500 copies in just 1 hour, and by the end of 1995 Microsoft had sold 7 million copies of Windows 95. That's impressive stuff for an operating system. I don't think we've really ever seen anything quite like it, probably not until Steve Jobs did his iPhone launch back in sort of 2007. So I think, you know, these sorts of really big events like this, these really big hype events, are pretty rare, and this was impressive. And bearing in mind this was $200 to $300 million in 1995, so I dread to think what that would cost now. So that was the launch event. An incredible event. Let's just watch just a couple of minutes of the highlights of that, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about gaming on Windows 95.
Please welcome Bill Gates and the Bill Gates Dancers. Hey, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake. I appreciate your making excuses for us. But the truth is, we decided to take the extra 9 months in order to test Windows 95 thoroughly and make sure it met the highest quality standards. We wanted people to be able to appreciate how Windows 95 makes computing faster, easier, and more fun.
All right, now see, this is the part that worries me. Faster, easier, more. See, I'm kind of a computer virgin here, Bill, and as we go through this, I hope you'll be gentle. I hope you'll be kind. All right?
Well, Windows 95 is so easy, even a talk show host can figure it out.
Oh, boy.
Why don't you show us how to demo it?
Oh, well, no. I'll do that. You know, for the past couple of months, I've had Windows 95 running on a computer in my office. I've been trying out, seeing what it can do, you know. And I have big news, folks. I haven't broken it, and I figure if I can use it, anybody can pretty much use this thing.
That's great, but I want you to show us how to use it. Since you're such an expert, show us some of your favorite features.
Favorite features? What are you saying, Bill? I don't know how to do this. You're saying maybe I can't handle this little computer thing? Maybe I don't have the guts to kind of make it work?
I think we paid you enough. You should do the demo.
Hopefully you're not too distracted by the old pipes screensaver behind me. That I could sit and actually just watch that thing. It was like some kind of weird hypnosis. Maybe that was the plan. Maybe that's what Bill Gates was doing all along. So, Windows 95, why was it important from a gaming point of view? Well, I think it's fairly safe to say that if we hadn't had Windows 95, gaming would probably be quite different nowadays. Now, before Windows 95, console gaming was the only way to play high quality arcade style games in your home. It just was. There were games on PC, and we had games like Prince of Persia, we had games like Doom, of course, Wolfenstein 3D on MS-DOS. So there were good games on MS-DOS. It was a good gaming platform, and we had Windows 3.1 at the time as well, which is where I kind of started my Windows Windows 3.1 wasn't an operating system really, it was just a layer over MS-DOS, but that's really where I started my Windows journey. And you couldn't really play games in Windows 3.1. There are a couple of sort of point and click type games that you could get. I remember playing something back in the day called World Empire 2 Deluxe, which was a sort of risk-based game that you could play in Windows, but they were mostly sort of little games that really, you know, weren't that great or a little bit short. And most of the games I played on Windows 3.1 were shareware, which is sort of free versions that you might have got on a magazine cover disc back in the day. So what did Windows 95 bring that was different? Well, it brought quite a few things, and the biggest thing, or the biggest, well, there were two big things really. I think probably the two biggest things was something called Plug and Play and something called DirectX. Plug and Play was supposed to be the big game changer for Windows 95. Microsoft made a big fuss about this, and the idea behind Plug and Play is pretty much what it says. Nowadays, we're totally used to the idea of plugging in a USB device of any sort, whether it's a printer, a joystick, a gamepad, a mouse, a keyboard, whatever it happens to be. We can plug it in and your PC or your Mac, and generally it'll work on both, will pick it up and it'll just work. It'll know how to go and get the drivers for it. It's just seamless. It just happens in the background and it just works. And that's been the case on Macintosh probably for the last 20 odd years, maybe even longer, but last 25 years. On the PC, probably it should have been since 1995, but certainly in the last 15-20 years, Microsoft have really kind of sorted that out as well. Back in the days of XP, it wasn't always so straightforward, but it was pretty good. Windows 95 was really the trailblazer for this. So the idea was that you could plug in any device and it would just work. So you could put a card inside, a plug and play would detect what that card was, and it would just work. To start with, plug and play didn't all work all that well, and there were sort of limits on what devices supported plug and play, but the idea was there, and that's what grew. And it just meant that the whole idea was you could plug a joystick in and it would just work.
Adding a printer, CD-ROM drive or whatever to your personal computer was sometimes a matter of trial and error. With Windows 95, it's a matter of plug and play. Start expanding. Start Windows 95.
Now, in practice, that wasn't always the case, but it was a start. And that was the first thing that was really, really important. The second thing that was really, really important was something called DirectX. And this probably was the most important thing, and something which we still see today. The first versions of DirectX didn't really work that well, but once we got to sort of DirectX 5 and DirectX 6, that is when things really started to change. Now, the idea behind DirectX was, if you think back to the DOS days, for those of you who remember, if you loaded a game up and you wanted to get the sound working and you had a Sound Blaster 16 in there, you loaded a game like Doom, you'd go into the settings and you'd say, I'm using a Sound Blaster 16, and if you were lucky, it was supported in that device. If you had some kind of weird sound card that wasn't Sound Blaster 16 compatible, chances are you wouldn't be able to get the sound to work. The same was true of a lot of things. So whether that was display or joystick or anything else like that, you relied on certain standards and you relied on the particular game you had having the right software to be able to support those devices. DirectX changed all of that. DirectX basically said, we'll just give developers who are building these games direct access to the hardware, and you won't have to worry about all of this sort of stuff. We'll deal with all of that side of it. So with plug and play and DirectX, you would load a game and you could plug a joystick in, and you didn't have to worry about having special drivers for it. You could just call back to Windows and say, you just deal with the sound, you just deal with the graphics. And that was why that was really, really important. So it meant you could load a game up and you didn't have to go and fiddle about with all the settings to get it to work as you expected, as you wanted it to. It would generally just work based on the setup that you had in Windows itself. And you also had other things as well. There were other benefits. So you had really good graphics card support, so you could have higher resolutions, more colors. So Doom, for instance, ran in a higher resolution on Windows 95. So Doom 95, which was in my bit between last week, or the one just gone. You didn't have to worry. Yeah, that was last week. You didn't have to worry about all of that side of things. You run in the high resolution. Sound just worked. The mouse just worked. No issues there. And you also got a native executable in Windows. So it was all optimized, especially for Windows. One of the things that we all had to do in DOS was we had to fiddle about with something called the auto-exec and the config.sys. And basically, we might have different memory profiles. So different games use memory in different ways. Some used extended memory, and there was expanded memory and high memory. And you'd have to load games into sort of the base 640k, and if I'm losing you, that's because that's how it was. I actually had a number of boot disks that I created in DOS, so you could basically pop it in and it would come up with this little DOS-based menu, and you'd select the sort of setup that you want to be able to run different sorts of games that required different kind of things. That's what DOS was like. It was a nuisance. Things ran really well and very efficiently under DOS, but ultimately Windows 95 just took all of that away. So you had no issues with having to do any of this fiddling about with memory. You didn't have to fiddle about with drivers. You just loaded and installed a native executable game file and it would just work. And that is how easy that was. And the final thing really about why it was so important, and this is probably more significant than I'd give it credit for, or I've given it credit for, and that is networking. Windows 95 was not the best when it came to getting on the internet and all those kind of things, but it was probably, well, as far as things go, it was pretty early in the life cycle. It was the first time that many of us experienced having an internet browser in our home. We could dial up through our modem, which would be plug and play, I might add, dial up through our modem, and we could go to a browser and we could go out to the internet for the first time. Many of us had never even surfed the web before, let alone knew what a search engine was or an email. So this all was given to us in Windows 95. We had all of that ability to go online, and going online, of course, nowadays meant that introduced chat, it introduced online play, it introduced the concept of downloads and patches and demos without having to go and buy a magazine. It also brought us very simple things like IGN guides and stuff like that, you know, game walkthroughs when we got stuck. The whole idea of networking on your home operating system, whilst you could do it in Windows 3.1, you could do it in DOS, all of those kind of things, you could do it on Linux. Windows 95 was the first time it really brought all of that to the home and to businesses for the masses. And so it was incredibly important in that regard. So there you go. That is why Windows 95 was so important then, and its impact as we go forward continues to be felt. Many modern consoles are much more in that kind of PC architecture now. Xbox essentially was a PC. Sony have moved more towards that PC-based architecture, which helps development. It also means having games ported from one platform to another is much easier now. We saw with the Sega Dreamcast, some games actually had supported Windows CE. Basically what it was Windows libraries essentially on some of the games. They didn't actually make as full use of it as you might think, but you'll see that Windows logo on Sega on the Dreamcast as well. So we started to see it then, and that just grew and grew and grew over the last sort of 25 years ago, over the last 25 years, 30 years. And ultimately, the way that we play games nowadays is largely down to what happened back then in Windows 95. Console gamers have a certain expectation about what their games are like. They also expect now to be able to cross-play. PC gamers, you know, whereas it was Sega versus Nintendo back in the day, for the last 20 years at least, probably the last 25 years, it's always been PC gaming versus console gaming and which is best. And I'm not going to tell you what I think. I think actually it's very different. You know, I think there's the argument of sitting down in your television with a controller and sitting and playing a PlayStation game, and it's a very different prospect to sitting in here with a mouse and a keyboard and playing on a PC style game or on my Mac or on a PC or whatever. So I think it's a different experience depending on what you're after. And to be honest with you, I like both, and I know that's a bit of a cop out, but I do like both. And yeah. That's why Windows 95 was incredibly important. It set the scene. It set the scene for PC gaming. 30 years later, its legacy is still setting the scene for PC gaming. So there you go. Right. Okay. I hope that was interesting. That was a bit of a ramble on my part, but I kind of wanted to say all the things I wanted to say. In the next section, we're going to quickly talk about my memories of Windows 95. Okay, so here we go. Here's my first memories of, well, PC really. My parents had a 386 back in the early 90s, and it was really the first time that I got introduced to be honest, with gaming at home. We didn't really have consoles back then. Most of my gaming experience really was going to my friend's house and playing on their computers. And a good friend of mine had an Amiga 500, and I used to go around his house and play on there. And I was very excited when my parents announced to me that they were going to be buying a PC. And the crazy thing about it is, the PC that we had, I think would have been around 92, 93, something like that, was on paper significantly more powerful than my friend's Amiga 500, which was really late 80s technology. It was 2 or 3 years older. It had about a quarter of the memory. It had far less processing capability. So I was very excited at the prospect of getting a PC and all the things I'd be able to do on that. And I have to say, to start with, it was a slightly disappointing experience. I mean, what you're seeing on the screen now, our C prompt is MS-DOS, and to be honest, that's, you started your PC up and that's generally what you got. Now, we had something else. We had Windows 3.1, which I'm going to go to in a minute. But to get your way around DOS, really, you had to learn how to basically what the commands were. So dir to list things, cd to change directories, all of those sorts of things. And there were lots of things in DOS. So if we go to DOS here and type dir, I'm a Unix person as well, so I keep wanting to type ls. These are all the commands. So let's see. And this was DOS. These are all the things you could do in here. So there were some things that were useful. Most of them were just utilities for doing things. Xcopy, QBasic was a programming tool for BASIC, so on and so forth. So that was MS-DOS. Not very exciting at all. And but luckily, we had Windows 3.1. So if I go Win, and there we go, Windows 3.1. So this was my first experience of Windows. And this was most people's experience of Windows back in the 90s. A lot of people had Windows 3.1. It was very, very popular. But really, all it was essentially just a front end for MS-DOS. A much nicer front end. It was much friendlier. We had games in there, which we still see even today. So our Solitaire and Minesweeper. And you could install sort of graphics-based word processing tools and spreadsheets and all those kind of things. And Windows 3.1, to be fair, was a real game changer for PC. It did bring the ability to be able to use sort of WYSIWYG style editors. And we had WordPerfect in DOS, but it wasn't the same as coming and using sort of Microsoft Word or WordPerfect for Windows. It was just, there was more fonts, there was more color, you could have pictures. It really was quite an impressive thing. And I remember seeing a photograph for the first time rendered in Windows 3.1, and it absolutely blew my mind. It was incredibly low resolution with about 16 colors, but that was it. That was how things were back then, and Windows 3.1, it served a purpose. It was around quite a long time, and it was my introduction to Windows, to Microsoft Windows. So, as you can imagine, when Windows 95 came along, well, that really did change things significantly. Now, just take one look at this before I switch over screens, what Windows 3.1 looks like. And then let's go to Windows 95. So immediately you can see much higher resolution that I'm running here. I've got these 3D screensavers that I've got set up here. I've got the ability to set many more colors. So if I can go up to 24-bit colors, which is more colors than I think my eye can see. And we've got now this start menu down the bottom, so it's much, much tidier. One of the things that you saw from the program manager in Windows 3.1 was everything was a bit of a mess. You had to sort of kind of manually tidy it up yourself. You used to see some really garish color settings and all sorts of things in there for that. Windows 95 came along and it was really kind of clean. We got our internet stuff here, this concept of my computer. So we could drill into here and all the things that we cared about, printers and drives and other things would appear in here. So you can see we've got Age of Empires disk in there at the moment. This really nice navigation thing. And let's not underestimate the fact that actually also the other thing you're seeing here is file names that are not limited in characters. So you've got these, long. You've got long file names. That was a big deal with Windows. If you drill into any of these, oh, AOL, there's a blast from the past. Your file names were longer. You could have, I think it was it 128 characters? Might have even been longer than that. And you've got things like inbox here, so we got the ability to set up email. Most of us had never seen that before, and the internet and those kind of things all set up. And our settings were also pretty easy. So we had our plug and play. We could go into our system area, go to device manager. We could get information about whether anything was broken. So we've got an issue with our plug and play BIOS, ironically, in here. We can go in, we can go to our display adapter, we can change our drivers. It was all in here. It was all very, very neat. And the other thing was you could run lots of things in parallel. So it was supposed to be multi-threaded. Many would argue that was somewhat of a stretch, but you know, you could have multi-threading. You had something called Task Manager, which would allow you to essentially kill programs off if you wanted to, if they weren't running properly. So you had loads more control. It was much neater. And you can imagine when you were looking at Windows 3.1 and Microsoft did all of their hype for Windows 95, just how cool this would have looked. And the coolness kind of didn't end there, really, by 1995 standards, of course. If we have a look at this is the Windows 95 CD that I've put in the installer CD. So we can add some additional stuff in here if we want to. So there's lots of things that we haven't actually installed yet. I wonder if, let's have a look at the details in here. So there's all these additional things we can install, and that's what I was looking for. So let's do that. And let's apply that. Windows 95 Disk 7. Alright, a momentary pause there whilst I figured out what to do. Now we should see in here Microsoft Games. Nope, not there. Where is it? Games. Here we go. And there we are. Free Cell, Hearts, Minesweeper and Solitaire. Minesweeper and Solitaire obviously coming over from Windows 3.1, but the introduction of Free Cell, which was somewhat of a phenomenon for a lot of people. And on the CD itself, we also had a game called Hover, which was, I seem to remember being quite a tricky game, although I probably haven't played this game for about 30 years. And there was one other thing which was really cool on the CD. And if we go up to here, first thing I want to show you actually is the, let's show you this one here. So let's give you this little video here. Look at those special effects. Oh, don't you just love the 90s, eh? But playing a video, a full video inside your PC operating system, that was well, good times. But there was one other video which was infamous, synonymous with Windows, and I'm only going to be able to play a little bit of this because of copyright. But there was, of course, this, and this was from Weezer, a band called Weezer. And they played a song called Buddy Holly, and they did the video for it, and it's set in the diner in Happy Days, which was a show that was out in the 1970s, for those of you who remember it. And yeah, we had a full version of this, and there was editing to make it look like the Fonz was in the video and everything. It was absolutely incredible. So you're gonna have to go find it yourself. I can't play it for too long because, yeah, copyright. You're gonna get about 3 bars and then I'm gonna cancel it. So there you go. That was Windows 95. What are your memories of Windows 95? I'd love to hear how you got to use it for the first time and what you thought of it and how it compared to MS-DOS and Windows 3.1 or Amiga or whatever it was you were doing at the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got into Windows 95 now. And it's a bit of a long story, so I'll try and keep it as short as I possibly can. But basically, as I mentioned to you earlier in the video, my parents had a 386 SX25 PC back in the day. And that wasn't capable of running Windows 95, of course. And when I went to university, I had to get my own PC, and I had no money. So I picked myself up an Amstrad 2086, which was a really old machine from the 80s. And but it was actually, it ran Windows 2, which was terrible. And it ran MS-DOS, I think, probably 5 or 6 actually. And it was good enough for me. I was only down to programming the first year, and I was programming in C and assembly 68000, and so it was fine. Yeah, I couldn't really do a lot with it. I could do a little bit of basic word processing, but it was DOS-based word processing. So it was pretty limited, but it did what it needed to do. Having said that, I knew in the second year I was going to need a little bit more oomph and a bit more power, and I was going to need some Windows-based programming environments, and I was going to need to write more stuff on Microsoft Word. So I decided to get myself a PC, and I got a job in the summer, and it was for £250. I bought an old 486. And the reason I bought a 486 was because when I left at the end of the first year, my uni was very much in the whole, we're going to be using Windows 3.1. They all had 486 machines, so they would have had to have replaced all the machines in our department. They would have had to have upgraded all the operating systems. We were running Windows 3.1, Windows 3.11 actually, it's what we were used to. So I went home in the summer thinking I could buy myself a 486 and that will be absolutely fine for when I come back and it won't cost me too much money. And I arrived on day one and I went into my first lab session and all the PCs were brand new. They were all Pentiums and they'd upgraded to Windows 95 literally everywhere. So this was about probably about a year, maybe 2 years after Windows 95 had come out actually. So it was a little while afterwards. So I was then wondering what I was going to do about it. So I went to a computer fair and I went online and I ordered myself a whole bunch of new stuff. And my 486 actually was a good sort of donor machine. It had a CD drive, it had floppy, it had a good case, and it got a 500 meg hard drive, Sound Blaster 16 in it. So actually, it was all right to sort of as a basis of a new computer. So I went to the computer fair and I went online and I bought a load of new bits. And I bought an AMD K6, which was equivalent to, I think, a Pentium 2 actually at the time, and it was a real bargain actually. I bought a new monitor and everything else like that, and I upgraded this old 486, ripped the guts out of it, and upgraded it, and I built myself a modern machine, and I had to then go buy Windows 95. So I walked into town that day. And I went to the local computer store, I guess. I can't remember exactly where I bought it from. It's probably Argos, actually. And I ordered my copy of Windows 95 on my student budget. So I think I just had my student loan and I was able to buy Windows 95. But it was still really expensive. I mean, it was £60, £70 I think I paid for it for an upgrade version, which I still have. And that was how I got into Windows 95. So I bought that. And it was a real mixed feeling for me because Windows 95... this time as a student, as a teenager, I thought Microsoft were the big bad and I didn't want anything to do with it, and I really had no choice. And there was a little bit of me that actually really I thought Windows 95 was quite cool. I never loved it. I never loved Windows 95, but it was so much better than anything that had happened before. And when I look back on it now and I think, actually, do you know what? This was my multimedia machine. I didn't have a stereo at uni. I didn't have a modern stereo anyway. I didn't have a CD player. So this was my first CD player. It was my games console. It was my work environment for doing my assignments. It was my word processor. It was all of those things to me, and it was important. It was actually very, very important, and it was essential to me going through uni. So all of those little things on there, the little games that it came with, and the fact that I could play some of my old DOS games, and I could play Doom 95 and Age of Empires, all of those kind of things. And Need for Speed, especially. Need for Speed 2 was something I played absolutely loads, which was a Windows 95 game. So all of those things were really, really important, and so it was my downtime as well as my work machine, and it was all in that one device. And that was the thing with Windows 95. It was a multimedia operating system like nothing we'd ever seen before. Not really, certainly not on a PC. And so those were my early memories of Windows. And I went on to have Windows 98 SE, and I went on to have Windows Millennium Edition, and that is for me the end of my Windows journey at home, because I had Millennium Edition and it was so bad that I said the words, I have to use this crap at work. I don't see why I should have to use it at home. And that's when I switched to Macintosh at home. But I continue to use Windows to this day. I have my ROG Ally, which is a full Windows 11 PC. My son has a full-blown Windows 11 PC. I use Windows 11 at work. So I have Windows, and it is still everywhere, and it is still super important. And you can still see that Windows 95 DNA, even in the most modern versions of Windows, despite the fact that things have moved on somewhat in the last 30 years. And even consoles. even in the console world, Windows 95 was important. It changed. A lot of the consoles now are more PC architecture based to allow for ease of porting the games and the cheapness of the platform, that sort of thing as well. So Microsoft will build games in a very familiar environment. All of the support is there for it. So it was really important from that point of view, even in the console market and console gaming. Was I a console gamer? Was I a PC gamer? Well, to start with, I was a PC gamer. I didn't really have consoles of my own. Am I a console gamer now? Yes, because I have a Mac, which means I don't have a lot of access to games on my Mac. But I am more of a console gamer, that is for sure. And that is largely down to the way that I play games. I don't prefer one over the other. I'm not going to get dragged into that argument. I mean, let's face it, it was Nintendo versus Sega at the end of the 80s nowadays, and for the last 20 plus years it's always been which is better, console or PC gaming. I don't subscribe to that. I think both bring very, very different things and different experiences for gaming. And PC gaming, the sorts of games you play on a PC and not the sort of games you can play on a console, and vice versa. You know, console gaming for me is always much more of a social event, and I kind of sit in the living room on a big sofa with a controller and just play silly games, whereas a PC might be something more serious or point and click or an Age of Empires type game. So they both brought something very different, and we're very fortunate to have had both, and that advantage is all about Windows 95. That's where it started. That's where it came from. That was the change that made PC gaming the thing that it is today. So there you go. That is my little look back down memory lane at Windows 95. As I said before, please do let me have your thoughts and your experiences and memories as well. I'd love to hear how you got into Windows 95 and how you found it. Yeah, what your experiences were. So coming up on the channel, we will be obviously having a look at what it's been like to live with Windows 95 once again for a month, and I'll obviously be revealing what is coming up next month. We will be back to consoles next month. That is at least the plan. And I will also be heading up to the Play Expo up in Blackpool, which I couldn't make last year, and I missed out on meeting some other YouTubers in real life, which was a real shame. But I will be there this year. I'm going to be there on the Saturday. If any of you are coming up, I will of course be the only person wearing a Pieces of 8-Bit t-shirt or hoodie, unless my family decide that they want to wear theirs as well. But just come and find me if you want to and say hello. I'd love to hear from you and speak to as many people as recognise me, to be honest. And I'm not expecting it to be like Mr. Beast. You know, with just over 600 subscribers, it's a slightly different prospect. But if you are going and you're there on the Saturday and you see me and you watch my videos, please do come and say hello. I'd love to say hello to you. So yeah, that is it for me for today. So I will leave it there. Thanks ever so much for watching. If you do enjoy these videos, please do hit that like and subscribe button. Really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you up at Play Expo next month. Other than that, please do take care of yourselves. I'll see you around. Bye for now.